On the morning of December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor lay tranquil under a golden sunrise, unaware of the devastation about to unfold. Admiral Husband Kimmel reviewed the Pacific Fleet's readiness, noting gaps in anti-air defenses and the vulnerable positioning of battleships at Pearl Harbor. In Washington, Secretary Cordell Hull urged Japan to withdraw from China, while the United States prepared an oil embargo that would strain Japanese resources. Japanese Foreign Minister Yuki Matsumoto pressed Tokyo's demands for resource access, rejecting US calls for a Japanese pullback from China and Indochina. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto plotted a surprise strike, believing that crippling Pearl Harbor would buy Japan time to secure Southeast Asian oil fields. In late November, the Japanese combined fleet assembled at Hitokapu Bay, positioning carriers to launch the unprecedented attack on Pearl Harbor. American codebreakers worked tirelessly on the Japanese diplomatic cipher Purple, yet they lacked the operational details that could have warned of the attack. Repeated notes between Hull and Matsumoto grew colder as Japanese demands for oil clashed with US insistence on Chinese withdrawal. In July 1941, the United States froze Japanese assets and halted oil shipments, striking at the heart of Japan's war machine. Yamamoto West, December 8, memorandum declared that a surprise strike would give Japan the time needed to seize Southeast Asian resources. At 7:55 a.m., the first wave of 183 Japanese aircraft crossed the horizon, heading straight for the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. From the decks of Akagi and Kaga, the first wave launched, each plane loaded with bombs and torpedoes aimed at the harbor. A 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb hit Arizona's forward turret, igniting the magazine and sinking the ship within minutes. Torpedo bombers struck Oklahoma amidships, causing the battleship to roll onto its side, trapping over 400 crew members. Kimmel stared at the frantic radio traffic, realizing the surprise attack had begun and his fleet was under assault. Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes smashed the airfields, wiping out over 100 aircraft and crippling American air response. At 9:10 a.m., the second wave focused on the air bases, raining bombs that destroyed another 100 planes on the ground. By the battle's end, Japan lost 29 aircraft and 64 crewmen, a cost that would later fuel American resolve. In the aftermath, survivors were pulled from the water, families gathered, and the nation confronted the stark reality of war. The following day, Congress voted to declare war on Japan, marking America's official entry into World War I. On December 8th, President Roosevelt addressed a stunned Congress, declaring war on Japan and rallying the nation to a newfound resolve. Newspapers across the country screamed the news, their front pages filled with stark headlines and images of burning ships and shattered lives. Recruitment centers swelled as thousands of young Americans signed up, answering the call sparked by the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Across the West Coast, shipyards accelerated production, turning the nation's factories into engines of war to replace lost battleships. Following the declaration, Japan's diplomatic mission withdrew from Washington, marking the final breakdown of peace talks between the two nations. In Tokyo, Admiral Yamamoto reviewed strategic maps, confident that the strike would grant Japan the time needed for its southern expansion. Soon after Pearl Harbor, Japanese carrier groups pressed forward, targeting the Philippines and striking swiftly across the western Pacific. American industry redirected its massive capacity, turning automobile plants into bustling factories that churned out aircraft at unprecedented rates. In February 1942, Executive Order 9066 forced the relocation of Japanese American citizens, uprooting thousands from their West Coast homes. War bonds surged as patriotic slogans encouraged Americans to invest in the nation's fight, financing the massive expansion of the armed forces. Newly enlisted soldiers underwent rigorous training, transforming raw recruits into disciplined units ready for deployment across distant battlefields. Women entered the workforce in droves, filling factories and shipyards, their contributions vital to the wartime production effort. The Office of War Information coordinated news, shaping public perception and maintaining morale on the home front throughout the conflict. In June 1942, the Battle of Midway turned the tide, with US forces sinking for Japanese carriers and halting Imperial expansion. Midway's victory shifted strategic momentum, forcing Japan onto the defensive and setting the stage for Allied island-hopping campaigns. Decades later, the USS Arizona Memorial stands as a solemn tribute, honoring those who perished on that fateful December morning. Admiral Kimmel visited the memorial, reflecting on the lessons of preparedness and the heavy price of surprise. Today, a powerful U.S. Pacific Fleet patrols the waters, a testament to the strategic resolve forged after Pearl Harbor. On the 75th anniversary, veterans and families gathered, honoring the sacrifice and reaffirming the commitment to peace. From that December dawn onward, Pearl Harbor reminds us that vigilance and unity remain essential in safeguarding freedom. Admiral Kimmel received the first official report of the strike while aboard USS Maryland, his face reflecting shock and resolve as the night glowed with distant flames. In Washington, Secretary Hull gathered senior officials to assess the devastation, pointing to a Pacific map as the nation grappled with unprecedented aggression. Minister Matsumoto dispatched a triumphant telegram to Tokyo, declaring the strike successful and urging continued pressure on the United States. Admiral Yamamoto examined the operational map aboard Akagi, confirming that the carrier fleet had executed the surprise attack as planned. Later that day, Congress convened in a special session, ultimately voting to declare war on Japan, a decisive step toward total mobilization. American factories rapidly retooled, employing millions of women and men alike to produce ships, aircraft, and weapons for the war effort. In the weeks after the attack, surviving vessels were repaired while fresh ships set sail, signaling the Navy's swift return to operational readiness. The USS Arizona's wreckage became a solemn shrine, honoring the 1,177 souls lost and serving as a lasting reminder of sacrifice. Families across the nation opened grim telegrams learning of loved ones missing or fallen, their grief echoing the nation's collective sorrow. Within weeks, the carrier USS Enterprise launched from Pearl Harbor, projecting American air power across the Pacific and marking a new offensive capability. Yamamoto's plan aimed to lure the U.S. fleet into a decisive showdown at Midway, setting the stage for a pivotal confrontation months later. U.S. codebreakers continued to decipher Japanese communications, gaining vital intelligence that would eventually turn the tide of the war. Propaganda campaigns surged, urging millions to enlist and support the war effort, forging a united home front. Japanese radio broadcast hailed the Pearl Harbor strike as a glorious triumph, reinforcing domestic confidence in the imperial campaign. Front-page headlines across America declared December the day that would live in infamy, galvanizing public sentiment toward war. President Roosevelt addressed the nation, delivering his famous Day of Infamy speech, rallying resolve and calling for unity. In 1942, suspicion led to the internment of Japanese American citizens, a tragic consequence of wartime fear and prejudice. For years after the attack, a formal dedication honored those who perished, cementing the memorial as a place of remembrance. Decades later, surviving veterans shared stories with new generations, keeping the memory of Pearl Harbor alive and relevant. Today, visitors walk the historic grounds, guided by technology and testimony, ensuring the lessons of Pearl Harbor endure for future generations. In early 1942, Admiral Kimmel reviewed the devastation, urging higher command to assess fleet losses and plan rapid repairs for the Pacific defense. Later that December, Secretary Hull signed the Declaration of War, transforming America's isolationist stance into a commitment to global conflict. In Tokyo, Foreign Minister Matsumoto received the U.S. declaration, confirming Japan's resolve to pursue its strategic objectives across the Pacific. Admiral Yamamoto reviewed the Pearl Harbor outcome, noting the tactical success, yet anticipating the inevitable American mobilization that would follow. On December 8th, Congress voted overwhelmingly for war, marking the United States' entry into World War I after Pearl Harbor's surprise attack. Across the nation, families gathered around radios and newspapers, grappling with the reality of a nation at war following the Pearl Harbor attack. American industry surged, converting car plants into war factories, producing thousands of tanks, aircraft, and ships to support the Pacific Campaign. Women enlisted in the Waves and Women as Army Corps, filling vital roles in communications, intelligence, and logistics as the war expanded. The success at Pearl Harbor set the stage for Midway, where us codebreakers and planners prepared a decisive counteroffensive in June 1942. By 1943, Allied forces reclaimed islands such as Guadalcanal, turning the tide in the Pacific and confirming Pearl Harbor's strategic impact. Victory over Japan arrived in August 1945. Jubilant crowds celebrated as the surrender ceremony unfolded aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The USS Arizona Memorial was dedicated later in 1945, honoring the 1,177 souls lost and serving as a solemn reminder of sacrifice. In the 1950s, surviving veterans gathered annually on Pearl Harbor's shore, sharing stories that kept the memory of the attack alive. During the 1960s, the site became a backdrop for peace demonstrations, linking Pearl Harbor's legacy to broader calls for global harmony. The 1970s saw a wave of documentaries that chronicled Pearl Harbor, bringing archival photographs and testimonies to new audiences. Restoration efforts in the 1980s preserved the USS Arizona's hull, allowing future generations to witness the ship's calm, submerged remains. Each year, a formal remembrance ceremony honors the fallen, with veterans and families laying wreaths at the Arizona Memorial. After the September attacks, Pearl Harbor ceremonies highlighted shared resilience, drawing parallels between two defining moments of American history. On the 80th anniversary, modern technology projected historic aircraft over the harbor, merging past and present in a moving tribute. Today, immersive education ensures that future generations understand Pearl Harbor's lessons,